Joining me from points up and down the eastern seaboard are Jen Saarbach and Kristen Kelly. They are known collectively as the co-founders of the Wall Street Skinny. It is a bastion of financial influence and Wall Street influence. They're both veterans of Wall Street. They were pals since the second grade. They really don't need introduction because they're all over the socials. How are you?
Outstanding. We're so happy to be here.
Oh, stop. This is diluting your brand. This is slumming it. This is like shopping at Aldi for you.
I highly disagree. You have interviewed friends of ours, Naima Raza, Moshe Wanunu. We are in good company here. We are honored to be amongst that list.
I guess we're just a bunch of coastal elites yucking it up.
Apparently.
But here, start me with, Jen, we share an alma mater. And I owe you kind of a psych copay for this. You're younger than me. You graduated 20 years ago. I graduated in 1998. And I just want somebody to get into my mind, because I worked on Wall Street right after college. What was I thinking? And what was I expected to think at the age of 21 or 22 with not fully formed gray matter? In our case, I don't know if that was the case when you graduated. They came to the Nassau Inn. Yep. One night it would be fondue night at Morgan Stanley. One night Goldman Sachs would host you in town. There'd be Lehman Brothers. There'd be Bear Stearns back in the day, all these places that don't exist. And I'm looking around, it's like, I ain't going to med school. I ain't going to the Army. I ain't going to law school. I tried the McKinsey thing. Why not? And that a whole pipeline depends on that. So kind of walk me through that, Jen.
Yeah, Robin, we spoke before we hit record about the fact that I majored in English literature, but really did my time at Princeton in the eating clubs, chugging beer and playing a game called Robo, which involved trying to bounce dirty quarters into said beer cups. And at one point during my junior year, my big sister in my sorority, who had just gone to work at your also alma mater, Goldman Sachs, said, "Do you have a plan for what you want to do with your life?" And I was like, "I don't know. I think I want to go write the great American novel." She was like, "Well, in the meantime, you need to pay rent. So how about you go get a summer internship at an investment bank?" I truly thought iBanking stood for internet banking. But to your point, there was this pipeline of successful kids in the Ivy League going to the investment banks and the consulting firms. I ended up going to Lehman Brothers, rest in peace. You mentioned them as being one of the candidates for that. Because to be honest, it was the only thing that I didn't have to lift a finger to do. They were there. There was an automatic resume drop, and I was able to tell a decent story about why I should work on Wall Street. The irony being I had no idea what I was actually going to do. So I used that as a way to, it was effectively finishing school, if you will, for someone who didn't know what they wanted to do with their life. And I used Wall Street as I'll just find a way to be financially independent straight out of school, and then I'll figure out what I really want to do. And I guess what I really wanted to do was start a show with my best friends in second grade about Wall Street and about all our ridiculous stories and experiences there. Who knew?
All right, but Kristen getting there, and in your case, you went to Brown, actually descending there. I remember the disillusionment because, after you take the Series 7 and Series 63, you're effectively, in my case, you have to become a spreadsheet and PowerPoint monkey. And I thought to myself way back when, isn't it much more effective for them to just build an in-house Kinko's spreadsheet department? And other people, Jen, maybe her big sister pulled her aside and said that this is the cycle of life, the cycle of hazing and putting in your dues. They are using you for your pedigree, just like you're using them, as she said, finishing school as a bridge to something else. Did you guys get this memo a lot sooner in life than I did?
Well, I actually want to go back because my journey was a little different. Jen was overdoing English literature. I was studying biomedical engineering, did an internship. It was in a cadaver lab in Rhode Island Hospital. And I was like, well, this seems terrible. I can't be a doctor because the dead people scare me. Blood scares me. So then I decided to do mechanical engineering and was like, well, I'm great at the, actual testing and stuff, but I can't build anything. It'll fall down. So when I went to visit Jen, this was my 21st birthday. I literally took this, it wasn't even the Greyhound bus. It was the Lucky Star bus that broke down on the side of the road.
The Chinatown bus.
It took me 8 hours to get there. I went to New York City and I got to visit Jen, and this was her junior internship at Morgan Stanley, and she's running all over New York City. She's getting paid all this money to essentially have this new class of friends to learn a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm going to be honest, what I wanted to do is I basically probably wanted to just be an academic, be a teacher, learn, whatever. I just wanted to be in school forever. So for me, the idea of being paid to learn at a place like Goldman or Morgan Stanley or whatever seemed amazing. So that's why I actually had to scramble. It was really hard for me to get a job offer at Morgan Stanley because I had nothing on my resume that said I was even remotely interested in finance. I didn't have a junior year internship. So I ended up having to stick around Brown for an extra year and get a master's just so I could enter the recruiting cycle. And then when I joined Morgan Stanley, I was put in the CDO group in 2007, and we all kind of know how that ended. So for me, I ended up, I guess, like
collateralized debt obligations in 2007.
Oh, yes.
And let me also timestamp something for both of you. My first article for Business Week in 2005 was called Lehman Brothers, a bank in bondage. And people are like, oh, Lehman just had the greatest quarter in Wall Street history. I was like, watch out for that bond exposure. We were on 1221 Avenue of the Americas, right opposite the old Lehman Brothers building. And I was really taking a contrarian tack. Nobody thought the financial crisis was coming down the pike.
No.
It was a great kind of prelapsarian era. And so, Kristen, you got a referral, or you got somebody, said, oh, wow, you're a master and you're an engineer, you're a master. Let's bring you in.
Well, yeah. So when I got my offer, it was for fixed income sales and trading. I didn't know anything about Wall Street. I didn't know banking versus sales and trading. I was kind of like, eh. And so they were like, you are very mathy. You seem like a good CDO structuring person. So they put me there, and my group went from 40 down to 3. And I was like, I got to get the hell out of here. So I was lucky because, again, I was cheap labor at the time. I was an analyst. So they moved me, or I got moved into like converts. And then that imploded because of the no short selling ban on financial stocks. So I moved into project finance and then into investment banking. And again, for me, like I just want to learn shit. Like, it was awesome. But I also was like, this is also not for me, because to your point, I didn't actually want to be doing the PowerPoint stuff like super late into the night. I was like, I want to like learn this and understand it. And then I kind of want to go home. So I ended up leaving and essentially teaching for 13
So did you
years
both
after that.
reunite in New York?
Oh, yeah. We lived across the street from each other.
This wasn't like the junior summer internship honeymoon thing with the booze cruise and nights in Atlantic City. This is the real deal. With Jen, when you finally got there, when you finally landed after graduation, you take the Series 7 and Series 63. What was that initiation like? You talk about training, but
I failed the Series 63 the first time. I affectionately refer to the Series 63 exam as the don't lie, cheat, or steal exam. And I was like, listen, I got a perfect score on my SATs. Like, how hard could this be? And I didn't even crack the book. So I walked into this test, and it was like, what year was the do not lie, cheat, or steal legislation enacted?
No. Back when I took it was like, you sell junk bonds to your great grandma. I mean, it was pretty,
maybe they made it harder.
That, then.
It was the 63, I think, is harder than the 7.
No, the
like,
7 is hard.
Point.
You're the math wonk, but they do bull call, spread, straddle, this.
Yeah, that one's
thing.
easy.
That's easy.
No,
That's easy.
you guys are crazy, because I flunked the Series 7. I'll tell you that.
Oh, you did?
Series 63, you get a newborn child with any basic human ethics. But I guess that illustrates
condemnation of Princeton between the two of us, that we couldn't pass the full suite of series exams.
But let me say honestly, and this is my condemnation of myself, and the process is, and Jen and Kristen, you admitted it. You're kind of mathy. I mean, what the heck was I expect to know? We were raw material that could have been sculpted into someone who wanted to learn and take long hours. You might appreciate it as a sorority sister, or I was told in the system that that's why they love varsity athletes, because they know how to subordinate themselves for the best.
Military.
At HBS, it was military, Mormons, and McKinsey.
Yeah.
I could say that. But somebody jump in here, and I'll give you a psych copay for this, because I still don't understand. I was back in New York last week. I had a meeting with someone at 85 Broad, which is now a WeWork space, right? And that's where this whole adventure started for me in this interview. Like, if I didn't have a great interview with someone who looked at the bottom of my resume, beginning of Goldman Sachs, and said, oh my gosh, you like sushi. Let's talk about sushi. What's an MP3? It wouldn't have snowballed to kind of the misadventure of my getting a job there. I did learn a ton. I was traumatized a ton, like probably both of you were. But I'm trying to process this now as a father, as a 50-year-old, as a person. Like, when did I get the memo to sign up for it? Was it peer pressure that everybody else was doing it? You weren't going to become a Rhodes Scholar. You weren't going to law school.
Robin, I think the phenomenon is that so many of us have been dealt this impression that we are supposed to pursue the most elite thing. You're supposed to get the best grades. You're supposed to go to the best school. You're supposed to get the best job. And for us, with I think I can't speak for you, but like I grew up in, kind of like the first generation. My mom was born in Brooklyn. My dad was born in the Bronx. Like everyone's got a hard knock story. And it was like, you go get one of the good jobs. You go be a doctor, lawyer, banker. And I was like, well, I don't want to read through documents all day and look at quotes because that was basically what being an English major was. Medicine, forget it, right? If someone tries to touch my collarbone, I lose my mind. So for me, I was like, well, I guess banker qualifies as a good job and someone somewhere is going to be proud of me and there's some money in it or whatever it is. And I think that was part of that indoctrination that we were all a part of. That was part of the Ivy League education and part of it. Like, you got to go tell everyone that you're going to be impressive. And it's like, at the end of the day, whom are we trying to impress? And I think that's what happens and why so many people eventually punch out is because you start to realize once your frontal lobe is fully developed that the only person it matters about impressing is yourself. And no one cares what you're doing. No one's like, you're so fancy and important because you're a vice president, one of tens of thousands at a giant institution.
It's not the vice president, it is a vice president.
My bugaboo is people throwing around MD like it actually, my MD, or I'm on MD track. That didn't mean anything to the outside world. But if I can indulge you kind of, Kristen, when and where was that disillusionment initially? I remember in my first performance review, I'll never forget this. I was told that I smile too much.
Whoa. Okay. Well, so my issue, it's funny. I mean, not knowing any of this, and I'm actually so curious, Roben, where you started, because I started sales and trading, like I said, CDO structuring. And I remember being there, I was like, this is not what I want to be doing. And to Jen's point, I do think there's always this like track of, I need to do the hardest thing. Like I was like, I wanted to do engineering because it was seen as the hardest thing in school. And then I wanted to get into banking because that was going to be the hardest. Like, so it's all of these, I feel like, steps that you try to pursue in, again, the pursuit of like just winning. But at the end of the day, to Jen's point, it's like, if you're not happy, who's winning? You're not winning. And for me, I did have this light bulb moment in my, third year when I was like, this just is not making me happy. And I decide like the thing that I loved the most was trading. Like I was such a nerd. I literally did it twice. Like I did it in sales and trading. And then I joined the converts desk and I like didn't know what earnings per share was. And I was like, maybe I need to do the banking training. And I loved it. It was my favorite thing in the world. I loved it so much. And so that's why I emailed the instructor that I had at the time. And I was like, I want to do what you do. Because it's like, you basically, again, my mom was a teacher. I love this sort of active performing, going in front of a group of people. There's just like this amazing energy with, again, the new hires where they're just so eager to learn. And again, kind of the nerd in me, it's like the academic. That was what lit me up. But I will say, I did have this moment of like, oh my God, what are people going to think of me? And I did see so many of my peers looking down on me because I wasn't pursuing private equity, because I turned out a job at a hedge fund in like, again, it was like research, because that's like the nerdy thing that I should have done, I feel like, on Wall Street, because again, I am a nerd. So I did have some research offers and I was like, I'm not going to do this because I felt like I was going to be trapped in this world of just not something that was going to make me happy. And literally the moment that I went to this other role, it's funny, I met my husband who happened to work in Morgan Stanley with me. And it wasn't because like, oh my God, like I met him, like I was doing this all for a guy. No, it was like, I was so unhappy actually when I was working on Wall Street that I literally like, I wasn't going out. I wasn't like really seeing friends. I was kind of just like a miserable human being. And then when I went and did the thing that I was supposed to do, like I instantly met my husband, and like, not that everything's been rainbows and sunshine since, but I do think you need to essentially do what's lighting you up. We literally had this conversation about yesteryear, where it's this woman who clearly is so in conflict with like what she should be doing. And it's like, if you're doing it, everyone can do something, and some people will love working in baking, right? But it's like, for me, it was just, it's just not what I'm good at. So,
well, my calling originally, and I wish more people undergrad pushed me to do it, was Persian male model. But then I listened to the siren song of going to work on Wall Street. But I digress, as I normally do. Joining us for full disclosure, Kristen Kelly and Jen Saarbach. They are known collectively as the co-founders of the Wall Street Skinny. It is a huge phenom on the socials. They were recently profiled in Bloomberg as Wall Street influencers. There's so much that we want to unpack and get into it. But could you, before we get there, tell us what those first years were like there? All right, we're dipping into a financial crisis. The hours are long. The capital markets were great. You're expected, nominally you come in on a great salary pre-bonus, but when you calculate all the hours and all the stress and having to be on a leash, back then it was a BlackBerry, it was pre-iPhone. Tell us, Jen, what that was like.
For me, it was so exciting because I sat on the trading floor at Lehman Brothers while we took down the global economy. So exciting is maybe the wrong word, but it was certainly a thrill a minute. My heart rate was definitely racing the entire time. I think a lot of people don't know what it's like to live through history and feel like you're having a front seat to it before the age of social media, where now everyone has a front seat to every single thing that happens because you're in it. There were no there were cameras documenting it, but I remember watching what was happening in real time, watching the markets fall apart. And we always joke kind of gloomily on our podcast that you learn best about things when they break. And learning about why the bond market was breaking and what was happening was, for me, a crash course education that was at once, I think, very intellectually stimulating at massive emotional cost. So, I mean, I told this story before on our show. I took my first vacation with my then boyfriend. We went to Greece the first week in September in 2008. And we were sitting on a ferry from, I think it was like from Mykonos to Santorini on his BlackBerry with like no signal, listening to the last Lehman earnings call ever. And he was like, what do you think? We've been working on this plan to do the good bank, bad bank thing. I was like, we're going to get back Monday and not have jobs. Like, this is not going to work out well. And sure enough, I mean, we were there.
I will say one recollection, this might be a little inside baseball. Your CFO, was it Aaron?
Aaron Callan.
Mm-hmm. It's Jen's idol.
I feel like the short sellers and others took glee
David
in
Einhorn?
kind of, in kind of put her hand to the fire. She completely burned out. Luckily, she was able to sell stock. But I felt for that one person, yes, you're CFO, you're the front of the firing line, and you have to be on the calls and answer all these things. But you have to answer for what this place institutionally has done over several years. And we've read about her and how she went off the grid afterwards. But I thought that was it was a really unfortunate lesson as well for all the frustrated, VP level and MD level women who wanted to rise up in the ranks.
Well, it was almost like the poster child for the dark side of elevating women in the workplace. Because, I mean, they were writing about her in Vogue. She was on the cover of all these magazines. She was a fashion icon. It was, hey, look, there's a woman in one of these seats. Let's talk about her all over the news. And within moments, she was being fed to the wolves. And she had come from the banking side. She was part of the team that took Blackstone public. I mean, she used to strut down the floor and everyone would be like, oh my God, we love her so much. Like, she's our idol. And then she was all in the headlines being picked apart for something that she didn't do. She wasn't at the helm of the institution when it made these big strategic decisions that ultimately took her down. So I think it was a little bit of a reckoning for someone like me, who was a junior woman coming up through the ranks and being told, like, hey, listen, it's not like it used to be, okay? You don't have to claw tooth and nail. Now we want to promote women. Now we want more women in these seats. But by the way, watch out, because here's what happens if you get a little too ornery.
Any truth? I mean, and Kristen, I also want to ask you how much, fact and fiction, art imitating life. I'm reminded talking to you about the now called classic margin call, because Zachary Quinto was a mechanical aerospace engineer, right? And the Demi Moore character, they said, was somewhat inspired by Aaron at Lehman Brothers, how they had her as the kind of the head that they offered the street, and this company was being liquidated over a weekend. It's a little sidetracked, but did that movie particularly, I guess you're asked about it all the time.
I mean, I will say this is like actually maybe a little bit embarrassing. I haven't seen Margin Call, so I think I need to watch it.
Required watching.
But Industry Season 3, they essentially did a reenactment. It was like the season finale, or maybe it was like the penultimate, but there was essentially a reenactment of Lehman. And then I would also argue the Morgan Stanley story, because by the way, across the street, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, everyone was watching them next. It was like the three remaining investment banks. Merrill had been bought by Bank of America. Lehman went down, and all the short sellers were looking at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. And so I was actually at the time on the converts desk, because like I said, I moved out of CDOs. And the way that they were structuring both the TARP money from the government and the rescue financing that came from Mitsubishi was in the form of like a convert. So the MD next to me was like wearing a heart monitor. Like there wasn't Oura rings or like, Apple watches at the time. So he had to like go out and buy a heart monitor because he was having heart palpitations, because he's the one who was essentially structuring this deal. And it was just like wild. I mean, we were similar to Jen. It's like we're watching the Bloomberg. Everyone's just like, looking at the stock price. It was like $7. It had been at like 100, and then it was like 55.
Save your voice. I think I want to kill this interview if you have not watched Margin Call. I mean, where have we lost you generationally? Like what? Office Space? Did you see Office Space?
Of course I've seen Office Space.
Okay, of course. We'll go back to Working Girl. Let's go back to the office. Let
the river run.
Not sure I saw Working Girl. Jen
Classic.
made me watch. Oh gosh, Trading Places. I did recently watch that.
Well, let me tell you by way of other footnote is that it was a late August or early September day, 2008, before I had to leave abroad for an assignment at Business Week. I covered emerging markets and Wall Street and various other things. And I remember sitting in that courtyard. Do you remember all those steel chairs right behind Lehman Brothers? Behind 7th Avenue, there was this very, homeless-proof courtyard where bankers and others could take lunch there. And It was a beautiful late summer morning, and I'm sitting there, and a gorgeous bird crashes into the glass and falls down. And it was, talk about English major, it was the ultimate foreshadowing about what was going to happen. I don't believe anybody thought that the system would cry uncle like this, that it was like, when you guys are asked about it at Thanksgivings and cocktail parties, it was the perfect kind of crime, a plausible deniability, like, what, we're extending the American dream to many people. And at the Main Street level, there are mortgages. And at the institutional level, there were people buying mortgages. It's nobody's problem. Just keep selling this stuff until it took the entire economy down.
Well, and I think it's just kind of having been a cog in the machine where it's like you weren't originating. First of all, I was on the CLO group, so I was doing loans, like corporate loans, which were fine. But on the asset-backed side, I do think like so many people, it's not like they were sitting there and they were like, well, what's like, I'm actually going to, fly to this place to see what happened with the mortgage servicer who was obviously getting bonuses for some of the predatory lending. And so I do think that a lot of what was happening was like, people just kind of were in their bubble. I mean, again, to your point, you're this person like fresh out of whether it's business school or undergrad, you're going in, you have a spreadsheet, right? It's like the way that the information kind of translates to what you're doing versus like what's actually happening on the ground. And by the way, the underlying assumption that housing prices just go up. So it's like there was so many things that I think the way that it was portrayed as like these evil people on Wall Street who had this like master plan when most people were kind of just like going about their lives and they're like, this all seems to make sense. Yeah, housing prices are going up. By the way, I think that people kind of think the same thing right now. It's like housing prices just keep going up. Now we're in a very different situation, but
but if at the very base level, you're rolling subprime falafel, subprime salami, like at what point is there kind of a responsibility to step back like, guys, I would say the ratings agencies dropped it. The government dropped it. There was a deregulation thing. That's why I'm saying it was the perfect kind of like, I don't know what happened here. And in the end, the taxpayer nominally was on the hook. The Fed was on the hook. The banks can come and say that the taxpayer made money on it, but there's no shortage of PTSD. It changed an entire generation. It might have enabled MAGA and the Tea Party and everything else that happened when you go back and study it. But suffice to say, isn't it amazing, Jen, 20 years into this, that you survived a great generational panic? We go back and read about J. Pierpont Morgan and the crash of 29 and the crash of 87. And if you put these on a normal scale, forget about even a log scale, you can't even see them on a chart anymore.
Well, I think one thing that's really interesting is hearing us talk about the housing market collapse of 2008 and talk about the ongoing impacts of that. I think one thing that we really can't underestimate is what it's meant for the equity market for an entire generation that's grown up effectively only understanding what equities look like in the aftermath of a long-term zero interest rate environment. And just like Kristen was saying, it's like, the assumption is that housing always goes up. The assumption now is like, well, the equity market always just kind of goes up, right? Like it's always just going to go up. And everyone's out there looking to call, is this a bubble? Like, where's the weakness? Because nobody wants to miss the next crisis. But the irony is market cycles are getting faster at digesting these things. And I think the biggest difference between where we are now and where we were then is that was a retail market crisis as well as an institutional crisis. Whereas I think now many of the articles that I'm reading and studies I'm seeing are showing that, hey, listen, weirdly, if you look at Gen Z, they all have great retirement accounts. They all have great trading accounts. They don't have a house. They don't have any money on hand, like to cover a $500 emergency medical expense, but they're trading the markets. And it's like, why? Well, because we've been in this environment where it's like, oh, okay, well, you can go bet on the equity markets because you can't really bet on any of these other things.
I mean, like, is that potentially dangerous if, back to my point about things just only go up? So you're essentially mostly in equities and not diversified because you don't have the ability to buy a home. And the thing about home ownership, it's not so much that like this is some amazing asset class that, no other asset class can replicate. But there's some ridiculous tax incentives you get, both with the ability to borrow money and get highly subsidized interest payments, the ability to sell. And on the other part of it is like it's forced savings. So you are forced to buy a house and you're not going to sell out just because, your Zillow price went down. So it is forcing you to buy and hold something over the long term, because I think that people do not respond well when the market goes down. And a lot of people will sell at the bottom. My dad talked about that. Like in 2008, he had a significant portion of his money in equities and he sold so I actually am very worried if that is the case, Jen, that we have this whole Gen Z who is probably more in equities than maybe other asset classes.
Oh, yeah.
And I do think when there is a correction.
Isn't that crazy to ponder, in that the decade you guys worked on Wall Street, 2000 to 2009, was the worst decade for the U.S. stock market since the Great Depression. It returned negative nominally and in real terms. And had you had the gumption and had you had the luck, both of you had jobs on Wall Street, presumably with generous 401k matches. No?
Well, we were first year. I mean, that's the other thing. And I wanted to kind of go back to something you said about like, why are people going to some of these jobs out of undergrad? A big part of it is because you can't live in New York City. Like, I mean, even with my investment banking salary, I had to borrow money from my parents so that I could split a 1-bedroom apartment with a friend to live. It was so expensive because you have student loans. You have to, the amount of money.
Is there still those Jamaican guys who put up the artificial wall?
Uh-huh.
Oh my God.
They're illegal now.
They might be illegal. I think
The
people
walls
have
are
to
illegal.
Yeah, I think they might have to get just like curtains.
But I'll say forced savings was that for me. Like I show up at Goldman, they're like, this is free money, kids. Like you didn't know this as a 20-year-old who wants to spend it on bottle service and, a fancy swank condo and everything else. That was the forced savings. And had you had the luck and the foresight, and again, in your not fully developed 22-year-old brain, the market has returned 17% a year compounded since its low in 2009. And it's amazing to me that now people are, generationally, you're talking about Gen Z being wedded to stock market returns, because there was a whole millennial generation that was washed out of the stock market. And I feel for the people who have not been able to avail themselves of housing gains and or stock market gains at a time of inflation when it's eating away at your dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the point about 2008 and being able to buy the dip if you were brave enough, the reality is when you're staring down the barrel of your entire industry disappearing, you're, I think, a little more risk averse than you otherwise would be. Yes. And also in terms of an order of magnitude thing, like the $10,000 I had in my 401k then, great, amazing. But it wasn't like I had $1 million at the age of 23 in my 401k, right? I was still just a second-year analyst. So it was like no man's land.
What kind of lifestyle? Were you like on the Hampton Jitney 5 days a week? What kind of money were you spending?
No, remember my base salary was what, $55,000, $60,000. I was paying $2,000 a month in rent, and I was living on $10 a day for food. And which
is not possible. I mean, Jen was essentially starving herself, and it was like eating cookies. That's the whole thing. Is when you're a first-year analyst, numbers sound high, but it's like because the cost of living in New York City is just so out of control, you end up just not being able to accumulate much. Like it's great on paper. It would be great if you lived like pretty much anywhere else in the country. But if you're trying to live in New York City, you're not going to have a lot of savings. Now, once you I feel like there's like the escape velocity. Like there is a tipping point where you can start to really save.
Stick moment.
Yeah. And I think once you hit like associate, you start to be there. And then all of a sudden, if you have a family and kids, now you're kind of locked in, and the amount of numbers that you need to like hit escape velocity get insane. You reached out and you said, oh my God, this, we have a mutual friend you went to HBS with. And we went to, my kids went to school together went to private school. But so again, the numbers in New York City are just so insane that even if the headline number looks great, it's running up quicksand.
Let me ask you before we go to break, Jen, you were there for that surreal day. There's a CNN clip, CNN correspondent, where everybody was leaving Lehman Brothers with their possessions in their boxes as it was being liquidated in this shotgun, September 2007. Barclays was going to take over some of the assets. And these two guys, they did a stunt. They were making out for the CNN camera. And he's like, you got to go back and look at it. I'm dating myself. And the correspondent moves. But where were you in that scene? Like you had dodged the bullet. You were able to stay through for the transition to Barclays?
Well, let me be clear. On September 15th, 2008, I was caught leaving the Lehman Brothers office in my pajamas, drunk, I didn't get the memo to bring one of those boxes into the office to get my possessions. So they had changed the trash bags because the janitorial staff was still working. God love them. And I put my shoes under my desk that were the entirety of my worldly possessions in a fresh trash bag, slung it over my shoulder like a little orphan in a Disney movie, and walked out, and the cameras caught me. And I got a call from my, again, then now ex-boyfriend, long since, saying, we just saw you on TV, not your best look.
That's like a Curb Your Enthusiasm scene. You should sell that to Larry David.
Just to find it first. If anyone finds it.
I just got tipsy, I promise.
So, yeah, that's where I was that night. And then I did end up getting picked up as one of the stragglers in the Barclays merger. The morning that they announced that, everyone was we kept coming into work because they were like, come in until further notice to this job that you don't have, where the phones aren't ringing, where you're sitting there looking at your Bloomberg, not knowing what to do all day. So everyone was going to lots of dentist appointments because they were all interviewing around the street. And the woman next to me was at her 5th dentist appointment that week. And I was sitting there, and we heard this commotion at the other side of the trading floor, and it was the equities guys. And I was the youngest person on the row at that time. So everyone was like, go down there and see what they're talking about. So I started walking down to see what they were talking about. And all of a sudden, the double doors open, those glass double doors open onto the floor, and these men in suits start walking towards me. And I was like, oh my God, who are these? What do I do? So I turned around and ran back to my desk, and they followed me. And they followed me back to my desk. And from the hoot next to mine, it was Bob Diamond from Barclays Capital making the announcement that they were buying Lehman Brothers. And one of the executives turns to me and he goes, you don't stand an effing chance. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so scared. What do I do? And punchline was apparently I did stand a chance because I was one of 5 people in rate sales that they ended up keeping. And then they slowly brought a bunch of people back. But I ended up staying on at Barclays for another year or two. And then I went across the street at Morgan Stanley so I could hang out with my best friend, Kristen.
Full disclosure, we are joined by the ingenues. I don't even know what that means. I would have missed it on the SAT of the Wall Street Skinny, the massive financial education and gossip and I don't know, random walk down Wall Street, everything that they've experienced. It's a treat to have them on, but please do stay with us. Full Disclosure airs on NPR, Spotify. You can watch us on YouTube. We're on all the great podcatchers. I'm sure I still have a Friendster and MySpace account somewhere. I put them all at one neat link for you, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. I'd like to give a shout out to our radio listeners on WVTF, Radio IQ across the great state of Virginia. We'd like to shout you out west, KPPQ in Ventura, California, down in Asheville, North Carolina, not too far from one of our esteemed guests today. We do have listeners on WPVM. Holler if you too would like us on your air. My DMs, alas, are always open. And check me every week on both NPR's Here and Now and CNN. If you are just joining us, I am obviously stoked and psyched and chuffed to be joined by Jen Saarbach and Kristen Kelly. They are the co-founders and the faces and the voices of the Wall Street Skinny, which is all over the socials. I know I sound like an aging Gen Xer. I know I've aged out of this conversation. You already admitted that you didn't see the movie Margin Call, so I'm not.
I need to. I'm going to go back and watch it.
I'm not going to do any Ferris Bueller references or Office Space references.
Oh, I've seen that.
Or anything. But I will confess this. I am jealous that you two congealed and put this together, because in my hour of desperation as a misfit on Wall Street, there was no such a thing as kind of a content offshoot. I remember I was asked to leave we among the analysts, we had this rotating thing where you have to leave voicemails with market recaps. And mine was I was like FM shock jock, FTSE's down 5 points, but don't sweat it. And they're like, chill the heck out, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
There was no avenue to do that. But today you look at Wall Street, their whole podcasting and thought leadership operations and everything. And I said to myself, if I just want to, Jen, I wrote for the college paper. And in my moment of desperation, I was like, how do I get back to that place? What do I do? And so my vision quest, I went to New York and I did interviews and everything. And I became a financial writer. And people are like, you're going to leave that for this. And of course, my mom is mourning that I was not going to be a VP or on MD track, but I had to do me, right?
Yeah.
But enough about me. You guys did this pivot a lot more artfully than I ever did. The fact that you're explaining these things that are very inside baseball, the fact that it's fun to listen to you on everything about tradwives or AI data centers or demystifying PE or a real inflation thing, How did that come together? Let's take us back to the Wayback Machine. Wall Street is in a collapse. You're figuring you have to figure your way out of this thing. We're not on Instagram yet. The smartphone, let's say the iPhone debuts in 2007. We're already 20 years into this, but take us back.
This is all Kristen's fault because she was teaching, and she was teaching at firms like Goldman Sachs and Blackstone all over the world. She was teaching all the incoming analysts and associates. So the, Robins of 1998, if you will. And it was actually 2023, and it was during the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. And as Kristen tells it, the kids were like, is this our Lehman Brothers, right? We're so scared that we are entering into an institution or an entire set of institutional markets that's going to collapse. What do we do? And Kristen was like, you know what? We should do a podcast because we talk on the phone all day for 4 hours anyway. We should just record our conversations, and you should explain to people what it was like living through Lehman Brothers and why this is different and how it works. And I was like, well, if we're going to do that, we got to explain what an investment bank is and what investment bankers do and what do they do in debt capital markets. And
Time out again, a refresher for our listeners, because in this velocity of falls and pulls back, people very easily forget the spring of 2023, right?
Yes,
we had three of the four largest bank failures in history, not for any systemic reason, but for reasons that they couldn't understand how to manage interest rate risk. Right? Like stuff that they taught us, she taught in Econ 101. And so it was an embarrassment of riches. They had way too much money in the thing, and then causing 3 out of the 4 largest bank failures in history, not because of toxic assets, but also people are on their smartphones banking. You could cause a run on a bank far earlier. It fortunately did not become systemic. It was handled in a good way, but it was a teachable moment for you, Kristen.
Well, this was the whole thing. And it's funny because, again, I was on the investment banking side. Like, sure, I dabbled in sales and trading for a hot minute. But I literally had said, Jen, I was like, I have no idea what the hell you did over in your rates world. And so the coolest thing, and we say this all the time, that people learn when things break. For me, that was like, oh my God, this is such a teachable moment about duration, right? Because it's like they were buying U.S. treasuries that in a investment banking model is your risk-free rate, right? It is risk-free. Well, no, it's not, because back to this point, duration matters. And so that was, as I said to Jen, I was like, this is such an amazing way to explain this concept. So we, again, hopped on, wanted to do this whole podcast thing because we were like, this seems so cool. And again, for us, we've been friends for, 35 years at this point.
Don't do the math.
Don't do the math. So we've been friends forever, and we kind of wanted to do a podcast or do something together forever. And given that we kind of both came from this world, it just seemed like this natural thing to do. Point about 2023 being this insane time. I mean, it did feel a little bit like we were possibly going back to the whole Lehman situation. But again, market cycles seem to be so short that something happens and then people forget about it and they move on.
Don't they call that a Minsky moment where periods of prolonged stability cause their own instability? I mean, isn't that a first world problem to have, that after payroll protection and everything else, these banks became so flush with cash and people were so, I guess, to your point, Jen, earlier, they were so complacent with interest rate risk that when you get a backup of the Fed having to hike rates by 4 or 5 points in 1 year, it exposes some of the most prestigious banks, retail banks in the country, as places that don't do basic risk management. And I think that to me was the first time kind of, and I thought the Feds would have scrutinized this, but they were not susceptible to the same stress test. So there was a bit of kind of 2008 redux, oh my gosh, the known unknowns and the known knowns and whatnot. But we passed that. And then meanwhile, a whole bigger thing was happening through that in this AI super build out, this CapEx super cycle, which you both have discussed. I think if somebody were to, ask me 10 years ago what the next super cycle would have been, I would have thought emerging markets or clean tech or anything. Out of nowhere, you have data centers left and right. Out of nowhere, NVIDIA, which was a gaming chip company back in my day, is the largest company on the planet, and it's swelling up the Korean stock market and the like. None of us could have projected that.
No, not at all. And I mean, I think this is where Kristen is, her interdisciplinary curiosity is so powerful, because you have someone who has this understanding of engineering, of power markets, and all those things that, you learn in undergrad thinking you're going one direction in your life. And then you're like, wait, got to dust that part of my brain off, because it's back to basics, actually, when we think about the massive energy needs for this massive AI build out and what that looks like and what it looks like for the likelihood of all of these AI data centers getting built versus, as Mark Cuban said the other day, becoming pickleball courts.
Really? Oh, I missed that.
That is the concern, because when we look at capital cycles of yesteryear, you go into any suburban area and these gigantic malls, or if you look at the movie Spirited Away, again, I don't know if I'm dating myself.
That one I don't know. That's the only one on the list.
That's an Oscar-winning Japanese movie, which kind of subterranean commentary about the Japanese bubble. And a lot of these ancient theme parks that are now abandoned and the like. And that's the worry in my state, Virginia, as you drive up and down and you see all these. I mean, this is not an incidental amount of CapEx, even if you broke it up for inflation-adjusted railroad, Y2K telecom build-out. It is orders of magnitude bigger. It is sucking in. And the opportunity cost of money, you see the IBM numbers last week. This is a gigantic kind of black hole sucking everything in its midst.
Well, it's funny. We had my dad come on the podcast because he was a former power plant engineer, and then he's built natural gas fired power plants, solar plants all over the U.S. And he also worked at Calpine when Calpine went bankrupt. And he was like, back in the day, he was like, we were bulk buying gas turbines and storing them in the desert. But then ultimately, the energy need, I think there was an estimated need in 2000 of 300 gigawatts of new power or new load that was going to have to be taken on, and to put that in context, I think he said peak load is 750 gigawatts of power at any point in time. And so it was significant. And ultimately there was this massive expectation of all of this need, and people just all these independent power producers Enron. I mean, this is where Enron kind of came from, right? And how they got wrapped up in that mess. But Energy, Morant, they all ended up going Chapter 11 because this massive expectation of the need to build out the power grid. And then ultimately it never materialized, and all these companies essentially went bankrupt. And again, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen now, but it was just kind of wild that he made the parallel that it was there was literally 300 gigawatts of estimated new load that was going to have to be taken on. And that is kind of exactly what people are estimating is needed from the data center build if you look into the sort of the 2030s. So again, who knows, history doesn't repeat itself. But I mean, I do think sometimes looking to the past to see where things went wrong can sometimes help.
Full disclosure, I'm Roben Farzad. We are joined by the telegenic, photogenic poets and quants galore duo of Jen Saarbach and Kristen Kelly. They're known as the Wall Street Skinny, recently profiled effusively in Bloomberg. I got to get past that paywall. But I hope you guys don't make it on the cover of the Forbes 30 or whatever it is. I don't know if you're...
I can't take that level of curse, okay? We and first of all,
news is
we don't have to
also
worry
not
about 30 under 30. We're approaching 50 under 50 at this point.
Who is the young woman who's now in the crosshairs? Incredibly embarrassing for JP Morgan, who sold them the data business. Is it Charlie Javis?
Oh, what is her name? Oh, I forget.
What was her name? No?
It's good, but whatever is the fallout from it is even worse, right? If you look at the stuff, is that the attorney fees and there's even lipid cream that was expensed to the attorneys, and stacks of seafood and everything. But it's a cautionary tale about, I think, the premier investment bank just built a tower to capitalism on Park Avenue, getting snookered by a young person selling supposed access to a different generation, right? And it's been all over the news. And that's just my segue into you guys, no doubt, get tons of overtures from firms. I mean, to promote materials, to come and do events. You probably get asked to do bat mitzvahs. I don't know, maybe.
Not at that one
Not yet, but let's go.
You should have a bat mitzvah investment plan, like a special ETF, the skinny ETF. But tell me about the business side of the thing. Tell me about how this morphed from a passion project and a hobby and two pals on microphones into actually a business, an enterprise.
It's funny. I think we initially set out to solve the problem that you were teasing out at the beginning of the show, which was all these young people in college, right? How do you help them understand what they're signing up for, why they're signing up for it? Do they want it? Do they understand how these things work? We set out to solve that problem that we'd encountered. So it's not like, hey, listen, you're automatically on this investment banking to private equity track when you actually would have made a great, treasury relative value trader, or you really would have been great in venture capital over here, investing in tech companies, whatever it is. We set out to solve that problem. And so the very first thing we did was we spent 2 years head down in the weeds by hand creating these massive self-paced courses for people to be able to access all the information that was in our heads and learn it themselves. And I joke that being on a fixed income trading floor is the last old school apprenticeship model in the world, where like you can't go pick up Fabozzi's handbook of fixed income securities and learn how to be a trader or a salesperson. You just can't. Like the textbook ain't going to teach it. This isn't something you can put into a spreadsheet and learn. This is reps, this is nuance, and this is teaching written down on the back of the napkin. So I was like, okay, here we go. Here's all this like old school jargony stuff. Let's put it into this course. And when we finally brought our heads up to breathe for a second, we found that just as much as young people in kind of, college to business school and early careers were our audience, just as much everybody who was more senior in the industry, the CEOs, the people who were running risk, they were listening to our content and they were looking to understand things that weren't in their direct line of, hey, this is what you get paid to learn about. I want to go learn about this and I want to have fun doing it. And so we ended up expanding the business unexpectedly into all of these really exciting places where it's like, hey, listen, you want to understand, for example, how private capital investments work. Okay, well, how about you bring us in to talk to your financial advisors about what it actually means to invest in these different products? Or, hey, you guys are talking to a bunch of investors about this new fund that you're raising. Well, what do they do when you say that they're going to be running like treasury basis trades, right? Like that's what we can do that I think is very, very hard to do and people are disincentivized from doing, which is explaining things that are so heavily jargonized and have been done so that way deliberately to make it seem like everyone on Wall Street knows something that you don't.
Of course.
And make it just very plain and clear how these things work and get rid of the nonsense.
Did you have to take seed money, startup money? I mean, it was clearly the opportunity cost of your time, and you don't have a father-in-law who made hundreds of millions of dollars at JetBlue. To your own point, I interviewed him at the IPO, by the way.
We are incredibly fortunate to be self-funded. We have turned down offers for outside investment because we wanted to be able to pivot freely. Because we've pivoted this business so many times.
Well, so you did make a killing on Wall Street. Or you made a killing on your education business. I mean, this is lifting the kimono. You did enough to be self-funded, to not have to take any, strings attached venture capital money.
Yes,
so I mean, again, we're also not like babies. So back to the point. So we've had some years of savings that we've been able to, but I will say, to Jen's point, I think what we initially thought we were doing was going to be like this financial education company. And then what sort of became very surprising is how many people would want us to come and do either to speak at universities or to speak at different venues, what have you. And then also, the social media has taken off. So then brands want to partner with us that way. So what's kind of nice for us is we get to do a whole bunch of different things. We have the podcast where we get to kind of do long form content. We have the, little videos, Jen. We have the videos we create for social media. We have the courses. So we kind of do a whole bunch of stuff. It's very diversified, which is great. It's also sometimes a problem because I think both of us are always trying to do so many things. And sometimes I feel like if we focused on one, it might be a little bit easier on ourselves because between the two of us have 6 kids, on top of, trying to run this business. So it's, we have a lot of cooks, fires in the kitchen. What's that? I'm so bad with these stupid terms. But yeah, so we have a lot of things going on. It's great from a diversification standpoint, but it also does mean that we're sort of very much doing a lot of things at once.
It's also just the two of us. So, we edit all our own content. We write all our own articles. We ventured onto Substack, and some of these articles are 11-page diatribes on the entire options market from start to finish, and some of them are, stream of consciousness rants about whatever the latest Fed decision was.
I will say for our listeners, you can't be doing too well if you're on full disclosure. We're kind of like a Denny's at 2 a.m. You go there if you have to, not because you want to. But
I disagree.
Anyway, but talk more about that concept. You have many kids amongst yourselves. And I was always told that, without crossing into anything that appears like I'm mansplaining or anything, but that is itself a glass ceiling that is prohibitive for partner track people in law firms, for MD partner track people where I worked in the past. Yes, these are egalitarian places. Yes, they might have great family leave policies. In practice, you have to work your butt off. You have to overcompensate. You have to short shrift oftentimes your children and the family life. And if the kids get, foot and mouth disease in preschool, that's supposed to be delegated to somebody else. So that itself is something that has frustrated. And I remember in business school, we had veterans of places like Lehman and others coming and telling us later in life what the pratfalls were.
I think, the joke is, I say this glibly, like everyone needs a wife, right? And everyone needs someone to be the person who's managing like all the things in the household, be someone who's managing all of the day to day, like Kristen talks about filling out the camp forms or like taking the kids to the doctor's appointments or doing all that stuff. And like we are both in 2-parent working households I only have 2 children. Kristen has 4 of them. She's doing the lion's share of the work. But all the stuff around the house does fall through the cracks or you need help, right? And there's no shame in bringing on help. I think both the blessing and the curse of I'll call it the creator economy, but really the entire economy of making, educational content, of making business content, of whatever it may be, that can be done from anywhere. The blessing and the curse is we can work at any time from any place. We'll be working, I joke that like I can film a reel and put it out while I'm skydiving, right? Because we can do all these things. We have access to do it wherever it is. The problem is then how do you individually flip the switch from work life, home life when both are so inextricably intertwined? And I think it's been tough for us because it'll be like, hey, Kristen's up at 2 a.m. nursing a kid, like figuring out, a real idea or whatever, being like, oh, hey, we need to do this or whatever. And then it's like, I'm waking up the next morning and I'm like driving the car, talking on the phone, all these things. So I think that's been a gift to us that our business is so mobile and so flexible, but it's also, the lines are very, very, very blurred.
Yeah.
Talk about AI and this other ceiling right now of kind of breaking through. There's no shortage of frustrated college grads, people in their early 20s and their 30s who are being, even though as you've been asked to comment on the unemployment rate, it looks great. It's near its natural level, but young people are being boxed out by AI. AI replacing, for example, financial analyst positions. It can thumbnail a darn good spreadsheet or outline or presentation and the like. Is that overrated? Is there general advice? I have no doubt that young people approach you left and right for advice and handholding.
I want Kristen to take this, but I just want to make the point that when it comes to the unemployment rate and you look at the granularity of it, young people are unemployed at much higher rates than older people in this economy. So I do just want to point that out.
Yeah, I think it's something that whether you're old, young, I think honestly, probably most people are terrified of this. I know Jen and I, even as content creators, AI is starting to, it's an attention economy and there's lots more content out there that's AI and people's attention is finite. And so at the end of the day, I think that the thing that, young people have is a lot of times they have a very, their brains are like little sponges. And I think that they have the ability to get up to speed, especially with this AI stuff, much more quickly. Like I would love to sort of bring someone in who can like essentially come in and help us get up the AI curve. Because again, to the point that, we made, it's just the 2 of us. We're kind of trying to do as much as we can. I will say we use AI a little bit, but like, honestly, we should be doing it better job. Like we don't know what we're doing. There is so much on the table that we probably should be optimizing AI to do. And I do think that there is so many opportunities for young people to kind of figure out how to use AI and then to come into an organization and help kind of like technologically improve different organizations. So I think that it's one of these things where, again, the superpower of young people is the flexibility in their brain, which again, we joke all the time that I wish my brain was like my 20-year-old brain. Like it would be amazing to be able to learn so much more quickly. And back to the point on the time, like, oftentimes if you're right out of school, you don't have a family, you don't have kids. So you get so much more time. And again, you have this amazing brain. So you have a superpower with AI. So I think that there's ways for people if they can think creatively. Like if I were able to go back in time and be 22 years old with AI and figure out how to do it, I think that it would be kind of a fun challenge. But I do, to your point, I think some of the more just like the traditional path of like you go to college, and by the way, maybe college isn't going to be necessary, like that huge expense. And again, unfortunately, I think the amount of time that people spend discovering who they are is important. But from an expense standpoint, maybe people aren't going to college as much anymore. Maybe there, isn't 3 years of law school and, young people are kind of figuring things out earlier. So again, I think that we're about to see things change significantly. But I think, again, being in America, in a place that is very entrepreneurial and like in a place where that is encouraged, I think that there's a lot of opportunities for people who want to break out of the traditional, I must go the investment banking or the McKinsey path or like go be a lawyer. So if you can figure out how to do that, I do think there's a lot of opportunities to be your own entrepreneur.
I do have a jump ball for you. I guess the Instagram algorithm gets me in that it introduced us and it knows I love your content. I love your explainers. That's where I initially reached out. A lot of times it does BS. Like I've gotten overtures from a lot of horse influencers because I once put yacht rock on a horse being let loose on a beach. And so all these people are trying to send me horse brushes and horse shampoo, which, yeah, I'm great. Let's stop horse-drawn carriages in New York, but it's not really my core competency. But anyway, I digress. I see all of these things like that one dude who says I was miserable as a JP Morgan banker. And then all I do is have to take a small business loan and buy, a dry cleaner or a laundromat that boomers are selling left and right. And I could make, enormous cash on cash returns. I was like, it can't be that easy. Number one. Number two, it hits me with the buy, borrow, and die theme. The rich are different from you because they buy stocks, they borrow against them, and over time, there's a step up that's given to people. Are there certain things that you see out there that you specifically want to go out and say, no, it's not that easy, it's disinformation? Because it's a free-for-all, right? You might be really well curated and researched and well-intentioned and meticulous in how you put these slides out, but there's some bad actors out there. There's some trolls out there. There's some people who don't care what they spew out into that sewer.
Kristen, you want to take it? Or you want me to go?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I do think that this whole being an influencer is, and again, we don't really identify as influencers. We feel like we're content creators. Like our goal is education. Nobody probably sees our lives and is like, we want to be like them. They're like, we learned some stuff from these chicks. But I do think that there is a narrative that you're going to essentially put some content out on Instagram and you're going to make a ton of money. And back to my point of, I think entrepreneurship is amazing. But a lot of times, again, people do need money to live. So by the way, if you want to start a company, you are going to then need to get often seed money. And then you are ultimately working for someone. It's just a venture capital investor. It's not yourself. So right. I do think that there is this idea that you're going to be able to go and be self-sufficient.
Passive income. It's there for the taking. Passive income. Why can't I just get passive income? It's like fruit falling off. It's never that easy. There's duration risk. There's interest rate risk. There's corporate downgrade risk. This is the frustrating thing when people approach me at cocktail parties and the like, that you feel the need to demystify.
Yeah.
I think, I 100% agree with Kristen that the idea that everyone's getting so rich becoming an influencer. The thing that I always see is the story of all I had to do was take out a loan and buy my first Airbnb for $100,000. Then I took the profits from that and I went and bought another Airbnb for $100,000. And now all of a sudden I have a portfolio of $100,000 Airbnbs and I'm a gajillionaire. And all you had to do was get that first one under your belt. Listen, one of the things that I did in my spare time in between my Wall Street career and now is I spent 10 years in real estate, both as an investor and an agent. Real estate is something that is extremely hyperlocal, that is extremely risky. You need to know a lot about that market and you do need to understand the debt markets very well because there's a massive amount of leverage inherent in all of those investment strategies. There's also the cost of all of the things that people don't think about, right? Whether it's the property management fee, because everyone's like, oh, well, just go be a property manager. Again, you're doing all this in your spare time. Being a property manager is a full-time job for a reason. Then there's the squatter risk, the legal risk. Then there's the tax risk. Then there's, the rezoning risk, right? What happens when a data center gets built next to this property that you bought for $100,000 that the appraisal said was worth $1 million, right? There's all these different things happening. And when you hear all this advice, this became really popular in a zero interest rate environment. Interest rates are not zero, okay? We are approaching the local highs on the 10-year note. We have an inverted yield curve at the very front end of the curve where everyone is anticipating Fed hikes coming sooner rather than later. It's really just a question of when, not if. So in that environment, going out and loading up on real estate to the max, irrespective of, geography of people's spending patterns of where we are in the interest rate cycle, that kind of advice to me, that's all griftery stuff. And I think that it's far more complex than that if you want to dip your toe in the market and become a real estate investor specifically.
What breaks this impasse with people locked out of the housing market, right? You have this story recently in the Wall Street Journal this week. It said that boomers are just hanging on to second and third properties. And if anything, decking them out even more.
They're upsizing.
Work this for me, Kristen. So let's suppose mortgages fall from the 7% levels closer to something that people have come to think of as normal. Of course, it was abnormal in the throes of the pandemic for mortgages to fall below 3%. And then people who did have dry powder and money went out and bought second and third homes and the like. But generationally, the economic physics is aging boomers can only hold on to these things for so long, but they've appreciated so much that younger people who've been husbanding cash and saving cash and waiting for that great mortgage, does that like a falling mortgage, does that bring in institutional investors? Like what stops this freeze, this generational tug of war that gets people in homes that have been waiting for decades to buy homes?
I mean, unfortunately, I think it's a supply issue. I don't think, back to the point of in like the 2008, because we pumped so much money into the system, when more people are able to borrow cheaply, you then have lots of bidders. And then obviously you had the institutional buyers and like prices went up. And at the end of the day, I mean, I do think because of what happened, there's just been so much underbuilding. I mean, this is the Ezra Klein like abundance movement, and there's so much red tape to getting things built. But I do think at the end of the day, it's a supply issue. So we've got to see people start building more homes because, to your point, mortgage rates go down, you start to have more people that from an affordability standpoint, it looks like they can afford whatever the house is. I used to teach this in like M&A, where it's like the way you think about affordability, oftentimes when you're looking at like the EPS accretion dilution, it's what is the actual expense over the course of whatever the year is. And so this is the same idea with, individuals. A lot of times they're not looking at what is the value of the house. It's like, what can I afford to pay if I'm looking at what the interest that I have to pay over that year is and the taxes and whatever the other expense are, HOA fees, whatever. And so again, to your point, as rates come down, more people start to be able to afford things, more buyers come in, means prices go up. And at the end of the day, I do think like the main way you get the prices to come down is to like start getting more houses in being built. In terms of like those second and third homes, it's funny because my parents are technically boomers and they technically have two houses, one in, Massachusetts and one in Florida. Now they're both like kind of like in like old people areas. So it's not exactly like, I don't know how many people are gonna be like, I want to go to this particular community because it tends to be like, again, older and it's a 2-bedroom. They're both 2 bedrooms. It's hard for people. I mean, I had 3 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment, but what I'm trying to say is, yeah, I do think there are a number of individuals who have those 2 homes. And, looking at my parents, it's like, what's it going to take for them to sell the second one? I don't know that they are until they're not able to afford it, because for them, they're like, we're going to go be a snowbird. So I don't know. I don't know what gets those boomers to sell. But I think at the end of the day, this is a supply issue more than anything else. And I think that's the only real way that we're going to be able to kind of get ourselves out of this problem.
To close this out, just a question for both of you. Are we not in the midst of the greatest wealth transfer generationally in history? That gets thrown around a lot by financial services firms and the like. But boomers did do well, right? They did get to ride that amazing interest rate cycle. Inflation was mostly killed since the early 80s. It did revisit us in 2022. The stock market has done stupendously. You see all these memes about, my dad bought this rancher for $40,000 and a bag of Doritos in 1975, and now they want $5 million for it. That money is going to pass on to Gen Xers and millennials and the like, and it puts you guys in a great catbird seat for education, right? These people are not watching CNBC over. They are opting into content like yours.
Yeah, I mean, I just went on vacation with my family. We spent 2 weeks in Hawaii, and I we're doing pretty well. Like, think we have a great life. Okay. We were the poorest people everywhere we went. And everywhere we went was families with a grandparent who was subsidizing the entire vacation, right? Who was like, hey, listen, I'm in my 70s. You've got all your little grandkids here. I got this, okay? I'm paying for the hotel and all the fancy meals. Just take me along on your vacation, okay? And so I do think that wealth transfer is happening, but I don't think it's happening in the same chunky way that people have thought of it traditionally, where it's like, here is the house, here is my will, right? People are looking for ways to spend their money and enjoy their time with their families as they're coming up as creatively as possible, to be able to not take a huge tax cut when it ultimately then gets passed down through estate taxes. So I think that what we're seeing that happen in dribs and drabs, whether it be private school tuition, whether it be subsidizing houses that are being bought right now. Again, in real estate, what I would see so many times was interfamily loans, where effectively the entire burden is coming from whatever it is, the boomers or the elder Gen X's, if you will, of people who are buying first-time home buyers, right? Who are buying at the $1 to $2 million price point, because that's now the price point for first-time home buyers. And that's how the wealth transfer is happening.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen as one giant wave the way that it historically did, because everyone's always thinking, how do I keep my money out of the government's hands?
And just to echo Jen, I mean, I think that that's also pushing up prices of housing, because so many people, I mean, I see it in my own family where I have a relative who needed to buy a house. And so it was coming from their parents, a significant portion of it. So it's like they are home buyers who by themselves wouldn't be able to afford this, but they can go obviously bid on a house because they have the extra support from parents. They're millennials. And so I think that that's already happening. And so it's pushing up, back to the point of housing, like it's pushing up the prices of houses. And I think it's just going to keep being a problem until, like I keep saying, we build more supply.
In closing, I have to ask you, Jen, what was your senior thesis on?
Oh, God. It was on. So again, I had to do English literature, but I basically sneakily did a comparative literature thesis and got sign off on it. So I did it on the Stanislaw Lem sci-fi novel Solaris, in conjunction with, it's very timely, Ulysses, and a number of Thomas Hardy books. Little Milan Kundera. It's terrible. I'm absolutely mortified. I went and opened it a year after graduating and immediately found a typo. I was like, that's it.
You graduated when?
2006.
True story. In a little more than a year, Jen Saarbach of the Wall Street Skinny went from graduating Princeton with this very newfangled senior thesis to carrying a garbage bag in her Manolo Blahniks outside of Lehman Brothers. You can't knock that down because it literally happened. There's photographic evidence of it. She is, of course, a co-founder of the Wall Street Skinny, and Kristen Kelly. Gosh, I can't thank you guys enough. I do hope that this drums up some bat mitzvah business for you. I think it can be really accretive. Much better spent than a DJ or a dancer.
You'll be right up there on stage with us.
Thank you. Please come back. I love this stuff.
This was so awesome. Thank you so much, Roben. We're so appreciative.
My pleasure. Full disclosure, special thanks to Ian Stewart. If you are listening to us on the radio, note that while we cut for broadcast length, the entirety of every interview is on podcasts. We are on the NPR network, Spotify, Apple. Watch us on YouTube. You could find them all at one link, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. And please do recommend us to a friend. A shout out to our home station, WVTF Radio IQ, Virginia's NPR news source. DM me to carry us on your air. And catch me every week on both CNN and NPR's Here and Now. I'm Roben Farzad. Thank you for listening. Back with you next week.